Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Sparks by Vina Vonk. My name is Jeroen, and I will guide you to the world of wine and stories behind the bottles. And today I have a very special guest. I'm very honored. His name is Benoît Gouez. He's the chief cellar master of the famous brand Moët Chandon. Benoît, thank you very much for joining me, and good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's sunny in Champagne today, so everything is fine.
Yeah, that's perfect. And before we open up this bottle, could you introduce yourself shortly?
So I'm Benoît Gouez. As you said, I'm the cellar master of Moët Chandon. It means that I'm ultimately the creator of the Moët Chandon champagne, and I've been with the house since 1998. So this year has been my 28th harvest at Moët Chandon, and chef de cave, that's the champagne way of telling cellar master, chef de cave since 2005. So I've been in that position for the past 20 years.
So the past 20 years, you are making these famous wines.
And clearly, we have the chance to work with a large diversity of grape supply coming from our estate and our partners. For me, quantity is not the main thing in champagne. If champagne has developed through houses rather than small growers, it's because to reach consistency in style and quality, you need to reach a certain size. In fact, champagne is known for being a blend of different varieties from different villages and even from different vintages in case of Brut Impérial. And if we blend so largely, it's because by nature in champagne, the climate is in heaven, the quality is quite versatile. So if we were doing only single vineyard, single vintages champagne, the quality would vary a lot. By reaching a certain size, by having access to a certain diversity of supply, you get the opportunity through the blending to reach the consistency champagne is known for. That's the reason why champagne has developed through big houses rather than small growers, and it's still the case today.
Yeah, perfect, because everywhere around the world where you go to a wine shop, almost everywhere, there's a bottle of Moët Chandon. And for a lot of people, this is the first experience with champagne because everybody knows it. Shall we open up this bottle?
Yes, of course.
This is a very large bottle. Oh, your bottle is already open. It looks beautiful. Santé?
Here's santé.
It's always very rich for me. Later on, we're going to share some tasting notes. But how did you become a cellar master?
By chance and good timing. There is no school of cellar master. Usually houses like to train generations and work on transmission. And I arrived at Moët Chandon in 1998. At that time, the chef de cave was Dominique Foulon. And I've worked alongside Dominique, but also Richard Geoffroy, but also Philippe Coulon for some years. And in 2005, when Philippe Coulon, who was the head of winemaking of Maison Moët, retired, I've been the right guy at the right place, at the right moment. It's always a question of circumstances, especially as I'm not from Champagne originally. My roots are in Brittany, and I've been raised in Normandy, so far away from vineyards. So I don't have a family story behind. But on another hand, I'm used to say that I don't have the weight of tradition on my shoulders. And after my studies, I traveled the world working in California, in Australia, in New Zealand to open my mind, to work on different terroirs and maybe to learn about different philosophies when it comes to winemaking. And back in 1998, I met Philippe Coulon, who had a good feeling. He wasn't looking for a new winemaker. I wasn't looking for a new job. But again, we had that feeling. And 3 months later, in April 1998, I joined the team. And let's say the chance I have had is that immediately my personal taste fitted the Moët Chandon style. I had not to adapt or change or learn to really feel good with the tasting committee. Quite immediately, I was making the same evaluations and ratings and tastings as the core team. So it has been very helpful for me to really integrate the tasting panel. And when the day has come to be in the position of taking the job of cellar master, that is both about being a guardian of the tradition, the heritage, the style, the values, what we call the DNA, and the philosophy in winemaking, but also a guide, because Moët Chandon has been founded in 1743. And even if the values of Moët Chandon remain the same, the climate, the technology, the know-how, the way of life, the consumers are changing. So we have also to continue to adapt and to evolve and to change in order to remain attractive and relevant. And if we speak of Brut Impérial, that is our flagship and probably the most known and therefore most loved champagne in the world, it has been created back in 1869. And I don't know what the taste of Brut Impérial was back then, but I'm sure it was not what it is today in terms of taste, in terms of intention, in terms of paying tribute to the diversity of champagne, in terms of developing a joyful fruitiness, quiet maturity, and effortless pleasure. That has always been the goal of Brut Impérial, but integrating the evolutions in the vineyards, in the wineries, in people's taste, we have continued to evolve and will continue to evolve. So it's always a balance between tradition and modernity, between, I would say, science and sensitivity. Moët Chandon always work on two legs. It's two names, Moët Chandon, two family. Everything is about balance of two things at Moët Chandon since the beginning.
Yeah, and what you also said was making champagne is like the art of assemblage, because it's made of different grapes. In champagne, there are 7 grapes allowed. Well, maybe 8 if you count the new one inside, also the Voltes. And you have a lot of different villages and a lot of different terroirs. Could you tell me something about your approach to blending and how do you make these choices?
Blending is really the core of the creative process in champagne. Obviously, it starts in the vineyards. We have to pay attention to the season, to the harvests, to the balance of the grapes. Winemaking is key. We have a winemaking style. We are known for being neutral, reductive, non-oxidative, because we like to get a joyful fruitiness. And for me, blending is really the moment where you put everything in place. And blending in champagne is quite complex because we work with different parameters. As you said, we work with different grape varieties. At Moët Chandon, always Pinot Noir, Meunier, Chardonnay in every blend we craft. Also coming from different villages, we have 319 villages classified in the Champagne appellation. Moët Chandon has access to last harvest to 282 of them. So this is by far the greatest diversity a house can have in Champagne. It combines our estate that is 1,500 hectares large, that is by far the largest in Champagne, and the highest in quality as it is made of half Grand Cru and 1/4 Premier Cru. And combined with our local partners in the vineyards, again, we have access to, let's say, 90% of the Champagne terroir. And that's also a richness because it means that I can cherry pick the nuances from the different terroirs of Côte des Blancs, Valais, Cézanne, Aube, and really play with all the details. And on top of that, when it comes to Brut Impérial and, let's say, the non-vintage range of champagne that represent 90% of the production, we also play with different vintages, with different harvests. We have quite a complex combination of things. And in the case of Collection Impériale, that is what I like to call the autonology of Moët Chandon that has been recently introduced to the market. We have added a 4th layer of complexity in the blending matrix, playing also with different ways of aging the reserve wines. And that is the core of the harmony of Moët Chandon. My goal is always to reach balance, harmony, spontaneity, immediate pleasure in everything we do, and try to combine the different parameters in harmony in order to deliver spontaneously what I like to call an effortless pleasure.
And but when you do this on a large scale, making champagne is very complex. But if you do it on a large scale, it's completely different. I always imagine when you are in the kitchen and you're trying to make a soup for like 4 person and somebody asks, next day 400 or 4,000 people will have what wants your soup. How do you going to do that? The same questions you have to ask yourself when you make champagne on a large
scale.
I
believe that in Champagne, bigger is better. Being big is beautiful in Champagne. Again, if Champagne has developed over the centuries through houses rather than small growers, there are good reasons for that. Again, it's because our climate is quite uneven, so the quality we get year after year is quite uneven. And by having access to so much diversity of grape supply is the richness of Moët Chandon, because again, I can really cherry pick the elements I need to craft a very complete blend. And for me, the difference between being industrial and artisanal is not so much the size, it's the mindset. It's how you approach the creation. I know a lot of small growers who are industrial in the sense that they repeat the same recipe year after year. They always do the same things. At Moët Chandon, we don't have recipes, and I don't want to have recipes. I want to adapt to the quality we get in every single vintage in order to enrich the diversity I have at my disposal at blending, and really I want to play with that diversity. That's the heart of the harmony of Moët Chandon, and to reach that, I need that quantity in term of diversity. Diversity is more important than and more organized to reach to craft the final blends. Usually at the end of the harvest, we finish with 800 up to 1,000 individual base wines. Clearly, it's impossible to blend 400, 500 different base wines together. So we go step by step. Last week, we have started to taste what we call the base wines, or the clear wines coming from the harvest 2025. It's going to take us about 3 weeks to taste all of them. We taste every morning, every afternoon, usually 30, 35 base wines per session. We evaluate the quality and the potential of every base wine, because I insist on that it's not just about immediate quality, it's about the potential, because we need to keep some wines in reserves. We know that if we go for a vintage, the bottle will stay in the cellars for a minimum of 6 up to 7 years. So we need to anticipate how the wine is going to develop. And if a wine is too open too early, certainly it means it hasn't such a big aging potential. And so it should be used in blends that will rotate quite fast in the cellars. Once we have evaluated the quality and the potential of every single wine, and basically we do 3 tastings before we decide how to use a wine as a reserve, as a non-vintage blend, as a vintage blend. We are going to create what we call pre-blends. We are going to regroup Chardonnays of the same potential, Pinot Noir of the same potential. So from 800, 1,000 still wines, base wines, we are going to create 40, 50, 60 pre-blends. And it is from that pre-blends that we'll go for the final blend that will integrate maybe 10 to 15 pre-blends. So we progressively reduce the possibilities in order to make the final blend at a human scale, let's say.
Yeah. And what kind of criteria do you have for being declared as a vintage? Like champagne made only of grapes from 1 year?
For me, first of all, vintage is the exception in Champagne. Altogether, the vintages in Champagne represent no more than 10% of the Champagne production, and they are not made every year. So our priority is always Brut Impérial first, and vintage is second. The philosophy beyond Brut Impérial and vintage is slightly different. Brut Impérial is our timeless classic. It has to be consistent in style, in taste, in emotion, whereas the vintages are always bespoke creation. It's like sur mesure in couture. Every single vintage is unique, is individual. And let's say there are 3 criteria I'm looking for to select a wine for a vintage blend. First, maturity. You need to get kind of maturity, and there are different profiles of maturity in Champagne, but you need to reach a certain level of maturity in terms of fruitiness, sugar content, structure, balance with the acidity. So first, the fruitiness. Second, clean grapes. One issue we have in Champagne is that when we have a rainy climate, like in 2023, for instance, we can have some rot developing in the vineyards. that is never noble rot. It's more gray rot. And when we have that, we lose in purity, frankness, and aging potential. So perfectly clean grapes are needed. And on top of that, even if the grapes are ripe and clean, I'm looking for what I like to call a charisma. You know, the wines have to tell a special story. If they are just ripe and clean, that's not enough. They need to have a personality. They need to have a unique character. They need to speak to the emotion. I'm used to say that blending Brut Impérial is rational, teamwork. Blending for a vintage is more personal and emotional. Sometimes people ask me, but why do you pick this wine or this one? Sometimes I'm even not able to explain. You know, it's my feeling, it's my experience, it's my intuition that that wine has something special. And to illustrate that, when I came to Champagne, I was coming from the south of France. I spent about 3 hours there working for cooperatives, and we're used to make wines to be drunk within a year. So I was always picking the wines that were the most expressive. So when I started tasting in Champagne, I did the same. I started to say, oh, that wine is more expressive, is more intense, it's richer, it's more tasty today. So I'm going to prefer that one. And Dominique Foulon was the chef de cave, did the opposite. And I realized that, and I come again on that idea of potential. If a wine is showing too well too early, it means that certainly its aging potential has started to be used. So the challenge in tasting based wines for Champagne is to be able to identify the potential, to taste wines that have some expression, but even more to give to give over time. So it's what I like to call the charisma, that potential for the future.
Yeah, but how do you make the choice? Okay, this will be something for the cuvée, this is something for the vintage, and this one we need to have like in a reserve wine. How do you make that choice? Is that also about a feeling?
No, there is more rationality behind. We know in the case of Brut Impérial, for instance, we know that I want to use wines coming from all over the Champagne region, because for me it's what is going to create the harmony and the balance and the consistency. I will always respect a balance of a large third of Pinot Noir, about a third of Meunier, and a smaller third of Chardonnay, because it is the way the 3 main grape varieties are represented in the Champagne vineyards. And Brut Impérial is the first ambassador of the Champagne as a whole. And I really want it to be a representative of the whole. And I'm looking for a certain profile of wines that will have that joyful fruitiness and that effortless pleasure that will give spontaneity when you taste it. Reserves and vintage are about the same level of quality. It's clearly wines with more identity, more character, and more and even more aging potential. The profile of the reserve wines are about the same as the vintage, but in the case of the reserve wines, I need to keep different profiles of reserves, because I never know what's going to be the profile of the next vintage, of the next harvest. So reserves are here to bring to the base year what the base year miss. For instance, if you have a base year that is very rich, the reserve should bring back some freshness. On the other hand, if the base year is fresh, the reserves might bring maturity, depth, intensity. So I need to keep a little bit. Reserves have to be seen as spices, you know, a box of spices where you are going to take the elements you miss in the base year in order to create the completeness. And I need to keep different profile. Whereas when I go for a vintage, I really want to craft something that is really unique and with a strong singular profile, with a more personal commitment to the vintage is more demanding. It's not about being consensual. It's not about being consistent. It's more about telling the story of the year and going for more personality, more character, and more emotional.
Yeah. So the assemblage from this wine is not the same every year. It's not like, okay, we always do 50% reserve wines and then 50% of.
No, again, because I don't want to fall into following a recipe. I don't believe into it, and it's not what nature gives us. Each year is a different story. 2025 was my 28th harvest at Moët Chandon. Almost every year, I'm saying to myself, okay, you have seen everything in Champagne. And at the end of the harvest, I'm always saying, no, this one was even different from all the other ones. And that's the beauty of Champagne. There are so many variations. And every year, I wouldn't say we have to start from scratch, but we have to appreciate the profile of the year. Sometimes the Côte des Blancs will suffer frost and we'll have less Chardonnay. Sometimes we will have less Pinot Noir. Sometimes the wines will be very rich. Sometimes they will be very fresh. And that we don't control. We don't control nature. We try to guide her a little bit, but we don't control nature. So we have to adapt with what nature gives us. And it's not like going to a market and buying what you need. In fact, at harvest, we pick the grapes. We get the grapes from our estate, from our partners. We sort the grapes in order to make the best possible wines individually. And after that, we are going to recreate our blends based on what nature has given us, with the chance we have in Champagne to play with the reserves. And it's where the reserves are very important, because if a year miss something, the reserves will be used to bring back the elements missing and to recreate the harmony we are looking for.
It's like the pepper and salt and the herbs and the spices.
The reserves, yes.
Yeah, for the reserves. And in the beginning of our conversation, you told me that you want to stay with the Moët signature, but the taste of the world is changing. Is that something you do in little steps year after year? So harvest after harvest, or do you have some feeling, okay, this year I want to do it like a bigger step?
No, we have to evolve slowly, but we have to keep evolving. I really believe in slow evolutions rather than big revolutions. And so every year we continue to add new technologies, new ways of working. Within the Moët Chandon DNA, there is what I like to call the purposeful progress. We are progressive. We like to go ahead, and we like to integrate innovations, new technologies, as long as it is for better quality or more sustainability. That's the reason why I say it's a purposeful progress. And climate is changing, technologies are changing, consumers are changing. So if you don't evolve, you die. Okay, so it's for me It's super important to evolve, but at the same time, Champagne, and especially Brut Impérial, is known for its consistency. Being consistent doesn't mean that the Brut Impérial we drink today is exactly the same as 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago. The philosophy is the same. The emotion we are looking for is the same, but we have to evolve. And just to illustrate one thing, we like to say that Moët Chandon is about generosity. We like to please people at first sip. And I think that generosity 20 years ago is not the same as it is today. It's the things evolve. When I started in the industry, I was very impressed with rich, sweet, oaky wines from California, from Argentina, from the south of France. And today, because I have developed myself, I have matured, I'm more interested into wines that are lighter. And I think that globally in the world of fine wine, people are looking for finesse, elegance, and lightness nowadays, though. So that's also a reason why of the evolution of the balance of Brut Impérial. I want to keep the fruitiness, I want to keep the generosity, but to express it with more lightness and precision.
You already told me something about innovation, the challenges, climate change. Do you have any current projects you're excited about, like the climate change, the sugar levels are getting higher, the acidity is getting lower? Maybe, could you tell me something about that?
Yeah, in fact, it's interesting because in a way you resume the maturity to sugar content and acidity. That is right, but not enough. In fact, we find nowadays, and 2025 was a perfect example because it's been a warm harvest, a harvest that has started in August for the 7th time since 2003, when we never started the harvest in August in the 20th century. And we found that in such warm years influenced by global warming, we have a sort of a desynchronization of the different parameters of maturity. Sugar, acids, aromas, tannins don't come together with the same timing. And this year we found that to get the proper fruitiness, we needed to reach very high levels of sugar content. When last year at 9.5, the grapes were ripe. This year, for the Meunier, we needed to reach at least 10. For the Pinot Noir, it was at least 10.5 to get the aromatic maturity. And for the Chardonnay, we had to wait till 11 alcohol potential to get the right fruitiness. And this is something we don't perfectly measure yet. We measure acidity, pH, but phenolic structure, tannins, aromatic precursors are things that we can appreciate through the berry tasting, but that we can't really analyze in lab yet. So it's something we're working on. That's one preoccupation. And second is vegetal material. We believe that we have to explore either new varieties like Voltis, but also maybe to re-explore our traditional varieties in order to find some genetic reserves and element of the adaptation. And 2 years ago, we have inaugurated conservatory of grape varieties that we call Essentia. It started 5 years ago. We have asked our growers to go in their older plots that had been planted before the 1970s, before Champagne has been uprooted and replanted with clones, in order to identify individuals of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Meunier, and others that look different, whatever the difference. And in fact, we have selected and replanted 800 different Chardonnay, because there is not one Chardonnay. Yeah, there are different expressions of Chardonnay. So we have selected and replanted 800 different varieties of Chardonnay, not varieties, but individuals of Chardonnay, 800 different individuals of Pinot Noir, 800 different individuals of Meunier, and 300 others. When I say others, it's the Arban, Petit Meunier that are already part in the appellation, but we have found some Gamay that used to be in Champagne a long time ago, Pink Chardonnay, we have found some Smoky Meunier. So other individuals that might have a future in Champagne if they demonstrate that they have a better potential of adaptation to hydric stress, to heat, to disease, or whatever. And that's for the vineyard pot. And we have exactly the same for yeast and bacteria. One specificity of Moët Chandon is that we use our own selections of yeast and bacteria. We have made our own selections coming from our vineyards. And the first selections have been done in the 1970s, and they have been redone in the 80s and the 90s. And today we are redoing a project of yeast selection, because we believe that the yeast we use today that have been for some selected in the 1970s have been selected at a moment where the climate wasn't the same, where the richness of the soil wasn't the same, and probably with all the changes that have been introduced through the climate or the technologies or the ways of working, nature has adapted also in the biological individuals. So we have studied again to select yeast and bacteria, to taste them and to see if some are performing better than the classic ones from the past. When I say performing better, it means being more adapted to the fact that with sustainable viticulture, we use less nitrogen, more herbs. So the balance in nutrients in our juices is not the same as in the past. So voilà, it's two roads we follow. Vine individuals in the vineyards and microbiological individuals in the winery.
Yeah. And are you also experimenting with more organic viticulture or biodynamic viticulture?
Experimenting, but just experimenting. We are definitely focused on sustainable viticulture. The estate of Moët Chandon has been certified Champagne Sustainable Viticulture and high environmental quality since 2014, 2015, about 10 years ago. And we believe it's the main road for Champagne. But obviously, we continue to always experiment and to try other ways of doing things. When you speak about organic viticulture, it's been very easy in 2025 to grow organic because we had very little water in the spring, so very little pressure with mildew and oidium in 2025. In 2024, it has been the exact opposite. There was so much pressure that organic was not enough to, in most situations, to contain the pressure. So again, I'm looking for diversity even in our vineyard, even in our practices in the vineyards. I don't think there is a perfect solution for all situations. We need to have a base that is again a sustainable viticulture in Champagne, and then when possible to try to go a little bit further, to try to do other things. And for that, we have introduced another program called Natura Nostra. Natura Nostra is about developing biodiversity in Champagne through planting trees and I don't know how to translate that, but to bring back the biodiversity in the vineyards, to connect the different ecosystem together, the different forests, the different rivers, and so in order to reintroduce more life in the vineyards. We have stopped using herbicides totally 3 years ago now in our vineyards. So our vineyards are fully planted with grass, and we have to relearn how to work the soils and find the right balance. And so again, we are not on recipes, but we're in a permanent evolution to experiment, to learn, to try, and to find the solutions that are the more adapted in one single context.
During that experimentation and innovation funnels, did you experience something that you think, wow, this should be a new cuvée? Is there a new cuvée coming?
Yes, there are new cuvées coming because when I say coming, it's experimentations at the moment. But for instance, I'm quite convinced that with the level of ripeness we reach in the grapes today, we should reconsider what we call coteaux champenois, the still wines from Champagne that used to be exceptions, and they will continue to be exceptions. Champagne is about bubbles first, but probably we have the opportunity to experiment a little bit more with still wines where we need to reach higher levels of maturity. But also, I continue to work on the Collection Impériale project that is about pushing the boundaries of blending by continuing to blend the varieties, the villages, the vintages. On top of that, working on different ways of aging the reserve wines in oak, on lees, in stainless steel, in order to really bring a fourth dimension in the blending matrix of Moët Chandon, what I call the autonology of Moët Chandon, like haute couture, that is about using the best ingredients, the best processes, creativity, and long time. Collection Impériale is a project I've been working for 20 years now. So the first creation has been launched 2 years ago, and in the years to come, there will be new creations from that autonology concept that will be released to the markets.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Shall we taste this wine together?
Yes, sir.
So there's a lot of reserve wines in it, a lot of other harvest years, different kind of grapes, the Pinot Noir, Meunier, Chardonnay. What do you find so special yourself on this wine?
With Brut Impérial, I'm looking for 3 main dimensions. The first one, before that, in terms of making, ale is always a tribute to the diversity of Champagne, what I call the collective craft, tribute to the grape varieties, always Pinot Noir, Meunier, Chardonnay, tribute to the 282 villages we have in our grape supply, tribute to the different harvests. Usually we blend 3 different harvests in the Brut Impérial, but also tribute to the collective of people, a collective of growers, of makers, of partners, but also of consumers. So crafting for me creating is a collective heart at Moët Chandon in Brut Impérial. So second, with Brut Impérial, I'm always looking for emotional precision. Brut Impérial is not made to speak to the brain. It's made to stimulate the senses, to stir emotions. But I believe that for that, we need to be precise in everything we do. I always believe that a great wine is always a balance of science and sensitivity. Science, I'm engineer myself, I'm square, but I'm also a creator. I'm sensitive. So the square and the round are the 2 elements that I play with to craft all our champagnes. I believe that if you rely only on sensitivity with no technical base, you might make a great wine from time to time, but there is very little chance you can be consistent. On the other hand, if you only rely on technicity, you will lack emotion. You will lack the soul. So you need also to bring your sensitivity. And for me, it's a subtle balanced blend between science and sensitivity. And finally, the third pillar of our winemaking philosophy, I already told you, is the purposeful progress. In terms of style, again, 3 elements: joyful fruitiness. We are fruit driven. We want our wines to taste like the grapes that have been made of, as frankly, as purely as possible. Therefore, we have developed for decades now a neutral or reductive winemaking, where we really want to preserve the integrity of the grapes and to make wines that really taste like the fresh grapes they are made of, avoiding any kind of external contribution, no oak, no oxidation, no aromatic yeast, whatever could change the pure taste of the grapes. So we are fruit driven. And in the case of Brut Impérial, the universe of the fruit is white, yellow, green, apple, pear, fresh peach, with hints of flowers and citrus fruits, and a slightly vegetal, minty element for the freshness. But Champagne is not just about fruitiness; it's about fruitiness and maturity. It's about grapes and yeast, because if we mature our Champagne for years in the cellars, it's really to develop the autolytic character, to develop the yeasty character. And with Brut Impérial, I'm looking for what I like to call a quiet maturity, a maturity that is a bit understated, that will stay a little below the fruitiness, will come to enrich the fruitiness and to develop blonde flavors of brioche, croissant, fresh bread, fresh nuts, that will come, enrich, complement the fruitiness, but without overpowering the fruitiness. Fruitiness must be the key element. And finally, for the palate, I already told you that idea of effortless pleasure. We want to give pleasure to consumers. That's the Moët Chandon mission. We want people to be happy when drinking our wines, and that with spontaneity and immediate feeling. Brut Impérial, in fact, is quite complex to craft, but I don't want to sell that complexity. For me, it's my kitchen. It's the way we work with the team. For the consumers, I want Brut Impérial to appear with a certain simplicity. I really believe that simplicity. Léonard de Vinci used to say that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, and I really believe into that. With Brut Impérial, I'm looking for a sort of essence of the grapes, of the fruits, with nothing to add and nothing to remove.
I like it because it's very accessible. It's not too complex to understand. It's very fruity, but indeed there's a toasty brioche backbone, give it lots of structure and making it in a very nice balance. Over the years, I developed my own taste, of course, but I also noticed that the mousse of the effervescence of the Moët Chandon is becoming a little bit more elegant. Is that something you also want to achieve, more elegant effervescence?
In fact, the quality of the effervescence is mostly given with time on lees. The longer you keep your champagne in the cellars on lees before disgorgement, the finer the bead, the more elegant the effervescence. So yes, we have extended the maturation. Today, there is no bottle of Brut Impérial leaving the cellars with less than 24 months. Here we have Magnums. Magnums, it's more than 3 years of maturation on lees. And that contributes to a finer bead, to a more elegant effervescence, but it has mostly been done to develop more complexity and more natural richness to the wine, and the quality of the bead is more a consequence. But it's a global equation where we're looking for more maturity on the nose, more natural richness on the nose, but more lightness at the same time. That is certainly also, I would say that the fact that the dosage has been lowered certainly contributes to that sensation of elegance also. Now, when the dosage was higher, maybe the wine was maybe a little bit more sticky, and therefore the elegance of the foam wasn't as obvious as it is today.
Yeah. And do you have a memorable bottle of yourself that you think, okay, when I think of a beautiful moment drinking this bottle, could you tell me something about that?
I have many great moments. Obviously, there are some vintages that talk to me more than others. 2006, because it has been my first vintage blend as chef de cave. 2003 is a turning point for me also, because it's the first obvious year influenced by global warming. The first year we have harvested in August with grapes that were very ripe, very low in acidity. Most people in Champagne decided to give up and not to go for a vintage. We've decided to go for it. And it has really changed our mindset of how we approach the harvest. In the past, I have great memories of vintages like 1959 or 1921 that are absolutely, amazing wines coming from our library of vintages. But maybe one of the most emotional memory I have had was that was some years ago. I was checking our library of vintages in the cellars, and I found bottles of 1872 that were supposed to be white. On my cellar book, I had no notification it could be something else. But using a light to check the level in the bottle, I found that the wine was colored, but it could have been oxidized, or it could have been a Mar de Champagne, it could have been whatever. And at the occasion of the launch of the 2004 Rosé vintage, I decided to make a great vertical of Rosé vintages at Moët Chandon, and we finished with some wine specialists to open one of the two remaining bottles of that 1872. And it happened to be a true rosé champagne with a high dosage, 100 grams per liter. That was classic at that time. And in fact, it was, it could have been very bad. And I had no B plan. I had only 2 bottles left. I opened one, and the other one is still in our cellars and will be never open. And when you open such a bottle from 1872, having no idea of what you could expect, and that you finally get a wine that wasn't perfect, but that was, I would say, emotional. The wine was still telling something, and all the people who had the chance to taste that wine had no reference to appreciate, but found that there was something still alive and still exciting and still emotional in that wine. Voilà. So, but anecdotes about champagne, I have many and many.
Thank you very much for sharing this story. And thank you very much for your time. We are at the end of the episode. Benoît Gouez, Chief Cellar Master of Moët Chandon. Thank you very much. I will enjoy this bottle. Thank you very much for joining me. This was a new episode of Sparks by Vinavonk. And see you next time. Santé.
Santé.